Hello. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jerry, and I'm normally engaged in the role of pastoring a church, actually multiple churches. But currently, I'm not. I'm on furlough. But actually, I'm coming to you today, anyways, talking to you as not as a pastor, but as a brother in Christ, as a believer in God. I want to talk to you about this issue. The news is obviously aflame with it right now. This murder of the human being known as George Floyd, and everything's talking about it: social media, the news, and of course the idea is that the officer of the law, the officer of the law, killed this man, murdered him, despite the fact that the man was asking for help, for aid, he could not breathe. He was murdered by an officer of the law, and at the same time, there were a number of officers of the law standing around, also doing nothing. And it's left the world reeling because of this. People can't understand how this could possibly have happened. What kind of world that we live in where this kind of thing could take place. I mean, Floyd is seen as over an 8-minute period repeatedly asking for help, and his cries were go unheeded. And eventually death takes place. My question as a starting point today is, how could this have happened? How does it get to the place where those who are called to uphold the law, to protect, to serve, can come to the place where they can commit murder, cold-blooded murder, allowing a person to expire before them and not be moved to do anything about it, to just let it happen? How can that occur? It pains me. It sickens me to have to even ask this kind of question, to have to think on these things, to think that it's possible for it to take place. If you spend any time thinking about this, it moves you inside. It makes you want to vomit. It's like George Floyd, was treated as though he were subhuman. Like an animal just on waiting to be slaughtered for whatever reason. And thus his dying cries were ignored. They were just ignored just like that. It's incredible. I mean, to say this is gross, disgusting, to say this is heartless and horrific, to say this is less, it just hardly begins to capture the terribleness of this very moment in time. So, could it have been different though? Could this have been different? Where did things go wrong? I mean, was it just a lack of training? Was it just the distractions of the moment? These are not excuses. I'm just exploring. Was it an unbelievable lack of empathy for another human being in distress? Was it cultivated tendencies towards racism that now come to full bear? Was it something, maybe as outlandish some people would consider as demonic possession itself? There's a myriad of reasons that it could have been. But the fact is, no matter what the rationales were, it's now happened. A man is dead because of it. And where do we go from here? It just remains unacceptable. And this is where, for me, it's over the years, the last number of years, it's becoming more and more personal. It's affecting me more in my thinking. Through social media platforms like Facebook, I am exposed more and more to the thinking of other folks, which I think is a good thing. I have friends, African American friends, for example, living in the United States, and I hear what they're talking about. I hear their angles, their perceptions, their understandings of these things. I hear their pain, and it makes me think, in ways I'd not thought of before. I've learned so much about this situation of which, honestly, previously, I was entirely ignorant. I really was oblivious to the situation. And what's come to the forefront these days for me is more than ever before in my life, is that I'm now having to take seriously what's going on. Or to put it a different way, I have never once in my life that I can recall ever had to think about the color of my skin. Ever had to think about that, how it might affect my daily walk, my daily efforts, my daily actions. And yet this is the issue that is plaguing so many of my friends of color, no matter where they may find themselves in the world, but especially in places like the US, perhaps in the Western world, where they tend to be the minority. And they're being affected by these things. I mean, they wonder how people will react to them because of their skin color. They wonder how it will go when they walk into that corner store. Will they be followed because of suspicions that they might be out to thieve something? They wonder how the person leading out in the application process at the job they're applying for will perceive them, will treat them, where they'll be rated on the scale of viability for the job. They wonder about how their children will be affected at the schools that they're now attending because their children have different styles of hair, because the pigment and the shade of pigment that they happen to have. These are all very real concerns. What I've discovered is that my brothers and sisters of color have to wade daily through a river of stereotypes and misconceptualizations, of abusive language, even physical assaults sometimes, of name-calling, of comparisons that make them feel like second-class human beings because they are not, shall we say, white, the default standard according to some people's approximations. And this has been growing. It's a growing concern in my heart because previous to these conversations that I've been able to be a part of now, to hearing the stories, I was never aware of these things before. I was ignorant, truly, in every sense of the word. I just did not know. As some would call it, my white privilege. And it has made me definitely pause for thoughts, maybe say, what can be done? I mean, I've never once had to conceptualize or prepare for, the day when I'll have to give my children a talk, that they might be hassled because of their skin color. That, in almost every place they'll go in life. Never had to think about that. I've never likely ever to have a talk with my kids regarding the fact that they need to be so careful around authority figures, such as the police. Because, lest their actions be misconstrued as potentially aggressive with fatal results. I mean, can you imagine having to give your kids that kind of talk? But yet my black friends have to do this for their children regularly. And this, I believe, is actually just scratching the surface, friends. This is just scratching the surface of what so many of my friends of color suffer through on a daily basis. Day by day, and to which I have been almost entirely ignorant my entire life. This is not to offer excuses either. This is not to say, oh, I'm sorry, that's too bad, I get it now. No, it's to go beyond that. It is to state the facts, and it's to state publicly that now I will not be journeying on from here in ignorance any longer. I cannot. And I believe that it would be equivalent, if I were to do that, to committing a crime, to turning my back on those who are in need. I can't do that. It's something I cannot do, not as a believer in God, especially not as a believer in a God of love. So related to this, as I currently live in England, I've been privileged to serve a number of churches and to work alongside a number of folks in these churches who are people of color. And they're wonderful folks who love the Lord, and they want to make a positive difference in His name, and we've been seeking to do that together. However, I'm aware of a number of stories, even within the congregations I've served and worked alongside, stories of the sufferings that they have encountered, maybe at work, just playing with their kids at the park, just the way that their neighbors look at them sometimes or do not interact with them or refuse to interact with them. When they've been slandered or stereotyped, it's horrible. Because these folks live in a country where they are the minority, where their skin color does not match with the majority of those around them. And thus they are looked at askance. They are given suspicious glances. They are looked at with, sort of misunderstanding and even seen as, I can't even think of the word right now, but you know what I'm saying. They suffer through that daily. And I know there's more stories that could be told. I'm certain of that. And I'm sure that there are more stories that need to be heard. I'm certain of that too. So here's my offer today I want to give to you. I want you to know today that as your brother in Christ, I am here for you. I'm here to listen to you. I'm not saying I'm going to provide answers. That's not my job, is to provide answers. No, not at all. I want to listen to you because listening, I believe, brings healing. Listening itself can bring healing. To show that time, take that time to care, to just try to understand. Especially when maybe I have not understood previously myself before. But if it helps you, then I want to be able to do that. Right? I want to be able to give that ear. And to even listen and to go to God with you and even on your behalf, should you feel maybe you can't go there yourself. To seek healing and solace and comfort and grace. These are things I think need to be done, for sure. Because isn't that what followers of Jesus do? Isn't that what they're called to do? Isn't that what they should do? Take that atmosphere with them, to be moved by the Spirit, to be following the Spirit's leading, to be acting like Jesus Christ did. I believe that's what a Christian does, is minister, bring healing. But I got a challenge I have to also put out there. Because if you've been listening this far, and especially if you are white, I need to challenge you. And this is not a rude challenge, but I need to challenge you to think about something. Because do you realize that you are able to improve the world in a way that our friends of color may not be able to? Right? They are in a system right now where they feel oppressed and under the gun, so to speak. They are not being heard. Yet the voices that can make a difference are those of the white folks, the people who, in a sense, we own this system. We have created this system. If we want to change that system, it's up to us. We're the ones who can make that difference. So I need you to help me and them to make the difference, to stand up, to start making changes, to start letting your voice be heard, because your voice carries power. You do. You have power to do that. I want to challenge you. Improve your world through this influence on behalf of your oppressed brothers and sisters. I'm sure some of you might be offended by such a challenge, though. You may be thinking to yourself, hey, I haven't done anything. I don't have anything against black people, brown people. I'm fine with them. Let bygones be bygones. Let people live as they will, and just you be nice to me, I'll be nice to you, and move on. But there's another reason for getting involved in these things. Let me take it deeper. Let me go into the deeper thinking here. You may not indeed have a reason for wanting to get involved, and that may be very consistent with your internal logic. For example, if you're someone who subscribes to a life philosophy where, this world is all that we have. This world is all that we really get. We're lucky to be here. Get all that you can, add it all up, work as hard as you can, pile it up, let your kids enjoy it, let your family enjoy it. You know what? Because you only get one go around. This is the only ride you get. And so, soak it up. If that's your belief, then I guess in one sense or another, you are being consistent. I can see why you might not want to get involved. It's like, look, let me just have my fun. Let me just have my time, do my thing, and then that's that. Life's over, right? So do what you can. You're being consistent at least. But at the same time, I must say, I think that life is bigger than that. But this is your call. But for those people who have, if you will, not to be rude, but have a shred of conscience, for those people who may subscribe to some sort of religious belief, some sort of organization or ethics or morality that they say, what they believe is important, that they when they look at people, they say, look, there's something here that's beyond the pale, that's just beyond the surface. That there's value here in these people around us. We need to go further than this, because if we believe that, if we say we believe that, are we living it out? Are we actually acting it out? Because that's the challenge I need to put out to you today. Live it out. It's like, otherwise, I don't think any of us want to be considered hypocritical. I don't think any of us want to be found as a hypocrite. So if you're saying it, if you're thinking it, do it. Live it out. Go further than you've gone. Go further. It needs to be done. I'm saying this to myself too, because I'm seeking now for myself to how I can go further, how I can start making a positive difference. So I'm asking you, can you make a positive difference too? Won't you join me? So that our lives are being lived in a consistent fashion. Also, in a related fashion, how can we actually justify judging another person based merely on the fact of, the skin color with which they were born or the place from which they come? How does it even make sense to use that as a metric? Where does that come from? Who said that's the bottom line? Who said that's the way it's supposed to be done? Where does that come from? Think about this. Think about this. This is serious. What it really ends up doing, right, is if we do that kind of thing, it ends up revealing our own hearts. It ends up revealing that our hearts are basically, definitely probably not subscribing to any biblical kind of value. And by that I mean the idea of the ethics of love, the ethos of love, of caring for one another, of going the extra distance, the extra mile, of seeking for true justice for all, not just for some, but for all. What can we be doing about that? See, because otherwise, friends, we end up treating each other like we're just cosmic accidents, like we have no inherent intrinsic worth that comes from the hands of the Father above, the God who made this universe, who made this, this world. If you're a believer in that way, you need to be seeking consistency, because we have not been doing that, if we're acting any other way. Sorry, I just got on my mind. I do have notes here, if I'm honest, and I'm just using them to springboard. If we're going to, do any kind of harm to one another in grievous ways, especially ways that bring death to a person, this will give direct offense to God Almighty. We need to be thinking about that, friends, because if you subscribe to this idea that there's a God, then are you living in a way that is in accordance with His ways? The Bible talks about how we have a heaven to gain and a hell to shun. But are we willing to listen and to learn, to live in accordance with what God is asking? Because He's not mamby-pamby about these things. He doesn't say, whatever, I'll let you all in, fine. It's, there are standards. There's a rationale. Do we want to live in a universe of evil forever? Because evil is going to be brought to an end one day. By God's grace, one day soon. Which side will we find ourselves on that day? Which choice will we make? Will we seek to be in accordance with the character of God, or will we be working against the character of God? It's a serious question. It's an important question. It needs to be answered. So as I mentioned earlier, I've not had to endure the pain of my friends of color. I've not had to endure what they've daily gone through. But I can sorrow with them. Not as just penance for my sins per se, but it's because it's the right thing to do. Because they matter. This is the truth. They matter. And they are hurting. So thus today I beg you, I plead with you, for the love of all that is good, for the love of God. Think on these things, especially if you are white, especially if you consider yourself a Christian. To sit by and to do nothing is essentially not an option. Not an option. Things need to change, friends. And we are the ones who can make that happen. So may God help us to make that happen.